My name is Sarah. This is for the outreach project. Um, so let's just get this started. I did my project on sense of direction. So I know where I'm going. It's the only things people say but don't mean. So of course, who hasn't heard the jokes about how men don't ever ask for directions? It's kind of a tale as old as time. Funny enough, my husband and I differ very greatly in our ability to sense direction. And he is the type of person who, even if we live someplace for a really long time, he will need to use Google Maps to get from our house to the grocery store. Whereas I seem to learn the route pretty quickly. And so I was interested the other day when we were going for a hike. Why is this? Why is it that I know the general direction of where our car is, even though we're in the middle of the desert and you can't even tell where your own foot is. So we did a little bit of research, and for those of us that are old enough to remember MapQuest, and you get the old go east after 1 mile, right? And it's like, who hated those directions? Because I absolutely did. But funny enough, I guess for those men who actually ask for directions, for men who ask for directions, there is a gender difference commonly reported in wayfinding, and studies actually showed that men are more likely to appreciate survey perspective directions, which would be your go 1 mile and turn east, very stereotypical MapQuest directions, whereas women are actually more likely to respond to route perspectives, which would be, take a left at, the tree. When you get to the shopping mall, go right. So quite interesting in that sense. So what is sense of direction? So sense of direction in kind of layman's terms, is your ability to know or sense where you are without the use of any external technologies or tools, right? So let's set the scene. You wake up suddenly to your body signaling you that it's time to go use the potty, right? It's the darkest hour of the night and you stumble around feeling your way down the hall, and inevitably you stub your toe on a dresser or run into the door jam with your shoulder, right? Who hasn't done this? But cue a sliver of light coming from beneath your roommate's door, because of course they're up late studying, who doesn't? And miraculously you can navigate your way to the Porcelain King and back without any incident. So in many animals, humans included, an accurate sense of direction is generated with the help of brain cells known as head direction neurons, which do so by incorporating two main streams of information: visual landmarks, as well as positional estimates based on your own movement. So a similar process in fruit flies occurs using their compass neurons, or EPG neurons, and they're actually a set of neurons that are arranged in a ring like a dial of a compass. And as they move about, there's this corresponding neural activity that moves around the ring, kind of like the needle of a compass. And so these neurons build a spatial map of their world within their brain, which is known as a cognitive map. So a cognitive map encodes spatial information and allows navigational planning. So the hippocampus is a structure containing cells responsible for constructing your cognitive map in a mammalian brain, right? So the hippocampus is this complex but very vulnerable brain structure right in the center stem of your brain, and it's embedded deeply into the center of your brain, right, and your skull within your temporal lobe, and it plays a major role in learning and memory, as well as a million other things. So the hippocampal neurons, which are known as place cells, become electrically active when an animal is traveling to specific locations within its environment. So hippocampal astrocytes respond to these spatial locations with elevations of intracellular calcium ion signals. So the information contained by your hippocampal astrocytes, it's not a passive copy of nearby neural information when subjects were scanned while recalling recorded events of their days past, with like photographs. Their activity patterns in the front left portion of their hippocampus reflected both temporal and spatial proximities. Remarkably, we've also shown to have grid-like codes in our entorhinal cortex. This setup reminds me a little bit of the old printed maps of New York City, right? Where you just have all these grids. So the entorhinal cortex is a part of your hippocampus structure that's essential for moving information to and from the hippocampus proper. In rodents, the preferred heading direction of the cells tend to be aligned with the orientation of its grid. So because the orientation of all the conjunctive grid cells tend to be aligned with each other, the average neural response tends to be greater for movement that aligns with that grid, rather than movements that are misaligned with that. So essentially your brain is giving you this like, heck yes, chemical signal when you're going in the right direction. Speaking of animals, humans aren't the only special creatures that hold this, right? Animals have an innate sense of direction and migration, and this is probably what stemmed a lot of the initial research in this exact field. So the hippocampal formation of mammals and birds mediates spatial orientation behaviors consistent with the map-like representations. So this and its location within the brain suggests that at least one function of the ancestral medial pallium, which is basically the ancestral hippocampus essentially, was spatial navigation. So recent studies have also shown that goldfish and certain reptiles species have shown that the medial pallium, which is the amphibious hippocampus, can also play an important role in their spatial orientation. Pigeons navigate by using both compass and information organized in map-like ways, which is known as the map and compass concept. And they actually use all sorts of different senses, including their olfactory systems, which is their nose, right? And so odorant molecules come into the nasal passage and they encounter receptors that are on the primary cilia of the olfactory sensory neurons. And that sends signals to the brain of like, hey, we're going in the right direction or not. And rodents can store multiple maps, which can represent either multiple environments where the set of place cells that fire in one place is different from the set of place cells that fire in another, or multiple states of the same environment where the same place cells are firing in the same location, but with reliably different maximum firing rates. So the hippocampus is definitely the culprit here. And so the big question is like, if you don't have an innate sense of direction, can you get better? Well, maybe, maybe not. So there's been a few arguments on both sides. One with London taxi drivers who spent years learning an extensive map of the London streets have shown to have larger hippocampi in the right rear side as a result of their training. And so the size of the hippocampus may predict the ability to acquire a cognitive map. But conversely, the relationship between already having a sense of direction and cognitive mapping is important to be able to build upon it. So people with a poor sense of direction have difficulty with learning the environment, specifically acquiring accurate knowledge of the configurations of a traveled route and judging spatial relationships between places on the route accurately and flexibly. So the moral of the story is don't delete your Google Maps, don't delete your Apple Maps, and don't be afraid to ask for directions.